Okay, let's get the ball rolling. My name is Suresh Sathyamurthy. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for Secretless Security. I'm very excited to have you all join this webinar today. Before I kick it off, a few housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording and any materials that the speakers refer to as a part of the conversations will be sent to you after the call. We will also publish the webinar on the website on demand for you to go watch it later if you so need to. The other piece to this is on the bottom of your Zoom screen, you will see a Q&A panel. Please use that panel for questions. I ask that we stay on mute and to allow the conversations to go through. And we will use the panel for questions. That said, I also want to thank everyone who sent me the questions ahead of time on LinkedIn. I'll make sure I cover some of those questions here today with the panelists. So today we have two eminent thought leaders in the space of identity security. Lalit Choda, who is the founder of Non-Human Identity Management, and Oded Hareven, who is the CEO and co-founder of Secretless Security. Before I get started, let me just start with a quick introduction. Lalit, what got you to found the Non-Human Identity Management group? And tell us a little bit about your background, and we'll get it started.
Thanks, Suresh, for the intro, and hi, everyone. Excited to be here on this webinar. So I've spent 30 years kind of in the industry, mainly in sort of investment banking, working at some of the largest global banks. 25 years ago, I got involved kind of not by design into sort of SOX controls and ended up becoming known as Mr. SOX within my organization. And ever since then, I've been running large regulatory IAM audit programs in the sort of human, PAM, and NHI space. About 4 years ago, I ran one of the largest NHI programs, a huge regulatory program at a large investment bank, nearly 4 years kind of in the making. And sort of after that, I kind of realized there's a huge amount of lack of knowledge in the industry about kind of non-human identities, machine identities, workload identities. Where do you go if you want to get some advice, guidance? And I thought, let's create a community. I started with a LinkedIn group and then formed the Non-Human Identity Management group. And our goal is to educate, evangelize, and provide guidance to organizations and provide research on kind of this topic. I've now known in the industry fondly as Mr. NHI.
Very nice. Oded, tell us a little bit more about yourself and what got you to start Secretless Security.
Well, I started my journey with cybersecurity more than 20 years ago within the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces. Been a reserve captain ever since. I've had there at least 8 to 10 years. Cybersecurity, infrastructure, DevOps before we called it DevOps, DevSecOps before we called it this way. Lots of application security, in which what we used to do back then, and a lot of identity management, identity access management. Ever since, CA technologies, again, focusing on identity and access management, cybersecurity. After that, a short period of time as a director of a product for a company named MoveIt within the B2C area, not necessarily related to enterprise security. 6 years back, together with my two founders, we founded Secretless. We have one of the founders that connect between us all. Shai used to be the country manager for CA Technologies. Nefello used to be the principal engineer for Intuit. And this is how we all got to get together and start the company.
How did you find the problem when this was 6 years before this conversation of these terms, NHI and machine identity, came to be? What led you to envision that there's a problem here and you need to start a company to solve it?
So back in the days in 2018, no one spoke about machine identities. That was maybe in 2019 when there was the beginning of that conversation. And back then it was mainly regarded to certificates and PKI. Secrets management used to be the terminology that only the one who really understood what is it within service accounts that needed to be managed. The ones who have experienced the proliferation of secrets, of API keys, credentials as a result of containerization, right? We'll talk about it later on, but basically, mostly DevOps and platform engineering security teams. They were the one to actually experience that. So we were able to find those teams that are back then were dealing mostly with open source solutions to manage secrets, yet they have yet to speak the language of non-human or to speak the language of machine identities, workload identities. This kind of language and terminology have only started a bit later when Gartner gave it light in 2020. But that's basically where we understood that there is a gap in the market with open source solutions. Everything started for Achilles going back with the understanding that key management is actually not very much efficient back then. And encryption keys management doesn't have ability to run in a non-trusted environment in the cloud. That technology named Achilles DFC, distributed fragment cryptography, that allows us until today, and everything that we build is built on top of that, invented by our CTO, Rafael. That technology basically allows us to run encryption or any kind of cryptography non-trusted environment using fragments of encryption keys that are never combined. Our customers have this particular customer fragment of their own so that they are protected from any third-party attack or breach or even government. And on top of that technology, we understood that it is well positioned to actually protect what we believed back then to be the next hype of identity management, which is secrets and machine identity. So we find that by investigating and questioning a lot of DevOps teams, what's happening today within your cloud environments, within your DevOps environments, and we found this major gap with protecting secrets back then, and then we understood that this is a microcosmos for a lot of other use cases.
It's fantastic to hear. So I have bucketed our series of questions over the next 25 minutes into 3 areas. The first area is understanding the fundamentals. There are folks on this call who may not be exposed to the problem, so we want to start with the fundamentals first. Then we will go into emerging trends, and then we look for the advice from both of you, for advice for security leaders, advice for CISOs, advice for platform leaders on what they need to do to solve the challenges associated with this. I also don't want to keep this as a panel and a Q&A. So if you have things that you would like to add to each other's point of view, feel free to jump in. We are here to hear more about you, and your thought leadership is what the audience wants to listen. So you may go beyond the questions that some of that I've collected through LinkedIn on what people want to hear from you. Okay, let's start with the understanding of what these machine identities and non-human identities are. Lalit, could you educate us on what those are fundamentally?
Sure. Look, I think there's a few terms that are floating around in the industry: non-human identity, machine identity, workload identity. I guess, unfortunately, at the moment, we haven't all converged on a common term. So I guess these are sometimes used kind of interchangeably. Some people prefer one term to the other. But really, a non-human identity kind of is a digital entity or a credential that represents machines, applications, automated processes, or services that are used in IT infrastructure. And non-human identities enable those machines or those software workloads to securely authenticate, operate, and perform tasks automatically, including access to other machines, processes, and services without any direct human interaction. Some of the examples that you'll hear: service accounts, API keys, tokens, certificates, system accounts. But typically, we deal with things in sort of 2 categories. One is your machines and your devices and how we manage those, your servers, your desktops, your IoT, OT equipment, and then you've got your software workloads, containers, VMs, your application processes, services, your APIs, some of your robotic processes, and now, I guess, AI, LLM, kind of agentic AI. These all rely on non-human or machine identities to operate and kind of interact and communicate, with each other.
So machines like these servers and virtual machines, databases, all of these have existed for some time. Why is this a problem now? And have you done any research or findings to help us understand why this has become such a mainstream topic, even though machines and machine entities have existed in the past?
Yeah, look, a great question. As I said, my first example of dealing with kind of this problem was 25 years ago when our SOX controls came in and we had to cycle, NHIs, we used to call them technical accounts. These were for database, Oracle, Sybase accounts that business application processes were using. So the problem's always been there. But really, it was more of an internal issue, right? Where we typically had sort of on-prem, but I guess over the last 10 years plus, where everything's now more distributed, with cloud, multi-cloud, SaaS, containerization, microservices. We've now seen a proliferation of what we call secret sprawl in the industry to deal with all that growth that we've seen in the industry. And unfortunately, kind of the industry's moved so fast and not really thought about a security first-led approach. And we just have a real mess now in the industry. There was one recent research done where 24 million hard-coded secrets were found in public GitHub repos. We also did some research recently where we published 52 NHI breaches. So clearly showing how prevalent now and easy it is for attackers. They no longer need to go, and look at getting human credentials and phishing campaigns to get in, right? They can discover these credentials, these API keys, tokens, readily available in public repos and other places, and come in and compromise an organization and your third parties. So I think in summary, huge hyper fragmentation in the industry, has caused a massive secret sprawl problem.
Thank you. And we will publish that 52 NHI breach reports link on the chat as well for those of you who want to see it. It gives you real-time understanding of companies being affected by this problem. And you can go through those to understand if those situations could be avoided within your environment as well. Now, switching to Oded. Oded, you have been in the identity security space before you were in the machine identity security space and non-human identity security space. Why can't the technologies that exist for human identities be extended for use for non-human identities? Well, what's the difference? Why is it a challenge to use my traditional IGA, PAM, and other technologies and extend it to manage non-human identities?
Sure. So machines and humans behave differently, as you can imagine, right? And again, machines are not necessarily the actual machines, right? Like IoT devices rather than servers and microfunctions, as well as exactly as Lalit as mentioned. Now, they behave differently. They speak differently. They communicate differently. Humans, obviously, with interactive mode, they would open up an RDP session, a terminal services, remote session. Humans would basically use the tools that they're used to, while machines would most probably use APIs. They would use a RESTful API. They would use SDKs. They would use a certain way and plugins to communicate with each other. And most importantly, not just the language that they speak is different, rather than also the skill. So if a certain human being can actually run, let's say, 200 different login requests on a certain day, or let's plus minus, it depends on what research do you read. A certain machine can find itself go up and down, as well as authentication with 4,000 transactions a day and even much more. Some millions of transactions a day. It depends on exactly the usage. Some microfunctions operate for 10 seconds and then they go down. So the ephemeral nature of machines and the fact that they run and then they destruct themselves, it's completely different. So number one, it's the language. Number two is the nature of how they operate. Most of them are, or many of them are ephemeral. So they exist and then they do not exist and then they come back, which which makes a lot of logic in terms of ephemeral identities that need to be used according to that. So the language, the way they operate, and eventually the scale. So the scale of machines and the scale of the volume of the transactions that they create is completely different. So tools that have been created for, let's say, privileged access were built for a certain amount of transactions to be made by a certain amount of audience within a certain organization, but in no way they were built for the mission criticality of production, right? Production environments require millions of transactions on a daily basis, sometimes even on a shortened time span. So for a certain burst in for 2 minutes in time, they require millions of transactions. So the systems that manage those machine identities and they're inline and protect those credentials on the fly, they need to be able to actually provide the service on that. Yeah, so that's to begin with. So obviously the tools and solutions that are able to answer the current challenges of machine identities would need to basically answer the different languages, the plugins, the SDKs, the APIs, the scale, and the ephemeral nature of that environment.
And I guess just to add to what Oded said, specifically on the scale point, there's various quotes out there in terms of the volume of NHIs relative to human identities, 25 to 50 to 1, maybe even 100 to 1. And I guess with agentic AI, I think that's going to grow even more exponentially. So just from a volume standpoint, we're dealing with significantly more volumes. Look, when it comes to human identities, there's a standard place where you can find out who are all your humans, your HR systems, where are all your NHIs that are out there, your machine identities, they're so distributed. There's never been standard control processes around JML, provisioning, deprovisioning. So historically, NHIs have been the forgotten problem child. And some of the controls there are very, very weak. You've got issues with hard-coded passwords in source code. So it's a very, very different, dynamic you're dealing with, i.e. workloads and how you manage them and how you interact, across those services. So yeah, very, very different, even though there are some common overlaps in terms of lifecycle processes between human and NHIs. It's a very different beast.
Got it. Now, you also published, Lalit, the Ultimate Guide to Non-Human Identity Management, which is more for educating the market on this. So this question is both for you and for Oded. So I'll start with you. Based on the publication, what are all the tools and technologies and products that an enterprise needs to buy to manage the full life cycle of non-human identities?
Okay, that's a tough question to ask in terms of all the tools. Look, I think first you need to think about, what is the overall life cycle for dealing with and managing NHIs. A lot of the issues that we have are legacy in nature to do with the fact that a lot of the NHIs, machine identities, are static in nature. They're long-lived. They've been created. Many of them been forgotten about. Not being used anymore. Credentials known, passwords, keys. They're not rotated. So to my earlier point, very, very weak controls. So typically, if you look at the overall life cycle, you need to have something that can deal with, how do you get an inventory of all your NHIs when you're dealing with such a hyper-fragmented environment. Getting that inventory is not easy. So that's one thing tooling needs to sort of cater for, is understanding what's out there, the size of the problem. You then need to inventory and do ownership. Right. Historically, these things were created by many different actors in the organization, never really owned. So when there's problems, when there's issues, when you need to apply controls, you don't know who to go after. When someone's connecting into your database, are they still connecting? Are they still using those credentials? So understanding usage, understanding the metadata, again, having tooling that can understand what's out there? Is it being used? Sort of posture management. The other thing you need to think about is kind of NHIs are typically, to Oded's point, very highly privileged in nature, just given the functions that they perform. They're your crown jewel accounts. But you'll also see many of them have been overprivileged, excessive privileges, right, when they need reads, so understanding, the permissions, the breadth of access, and then to one of the earlier points around secret sprawl, there's billions of credentials that are hard-coded in source code, public repos, private repos, easy to discover. So you then need to think about how do you secure them. I guess some of the traditional tools that are out there, vaulting tools, are important. You need to think about scanning tools to understand and find these hard-coded credentials so you can secure them. And then monitoring. One of the things that doesn't get talked about a lot is that we were very concerned about breaches and sort of threat actors externally discovering compromising NHIs. But one thing folks may not know is the NHIs are used internally by humans as well, inappropriately. So you need to have monitoring controls, looking for anomalies, looking for cases where people are inappropriately using the NHIs. But really, target state, you need to get to a zero trust kind of architecture, ephemeral secrets, just in time. And that's really where you need to get to. But, you really need to kind of have a hybrid approach, which deals with kind of the legacy tech debt that you got with static credentials and how you manage and control them, but then, move to more of a zero trust footing. And I guess some of the tooling there on kind of more the target state is kind of new and developing, and I'm sure Oded will share some insights on, what's happening from a tooling standpoint later on in the session.
Same question to you. What do we need for managing the full life cycle for NHIs?
Well, so obviously when Achilles is looking at the picture of managing machine identities, we continue to advocate the way that Gartner is covering it. We've been lucky and thankful to be, to take, we believe, significant part, having to be one of the first vendors to actually deal with machine identities whenever they that emerged back in 2020 together with Gartner. And as we told them, and as we believe that they looked at, there's a famous Venn diagram that they have published with regards to how to manage what's the identity fabric that combines the different tools. And those tools must have, first of all, the management of the objects that authenticate those machines. But before everything starts, according to our perspective, with the ability to manage and protect the secrets that those machine identities are validating. And that includes the API keys, that includes the tokens, and later on, certificate management. Encryption keys are also part of the game, the ability to protect encryption keys, the asymmetric, the symmetric keys, because the asymmetric are the one that also sign the certificates, and also the symmetric ones are the one to protect and to encrypt the credentials. Some aspects of secure mode access in a way of machine-to-machine authentication in a way that this is being monitored is also part of this game. So protecting machine identities to start with is with those objects. This is exactly what also Achilles have started with. With time, there has been more understanding with regards to, okay, so you have the certificate lifecycle management, the key management, the secrets management, obviously, some PAM use cases, privileged access management use cases that are relevant for service accounts. And with time, there has been more and more understanding in the industry that entitlement management, the IGA part, the governance, the understanding of, exactly as Lalit mentioned, the understanding of how wide the privileges that machines have. Most of that technology, by the way, in previous years has been around with IGA companies, but now we see a good rise of new vendors that are providing something that would be able to match the current scale with more, with more graphs and things that are more suitable for this industry and for this challenge. What I believe that we will see also is the adaptation of those tools to the AI era. We'll touch that further on, I believe, later on in this webinar. But But definitely what's interesting to see is that within secrets management and within all the different types that I've just mentioned, given that machine identities and secrets management have been implemented right on a certain solution, then it has a good potential to already be ready for the AI era, given dynamic credentials, giving the basic and the advanced capabilities of secrets management, which is the ability to store secrets, to rotate secrets, API keys, certificates, credentials whenever they are, the ability to dynamically create those and delete those zero standing privileges, and to help organizations to also go up to secretless era, which is to provide advanced authentication methods like OAuth, OIDC, and so on, and down to reduce the usage and the dependency within secrets as much as possible. This is exactly what is needed in order to mitigate the risk.
So let's talk about the elephant in the room. Last year, same time, there wasn't much conversations about agentic AI security, LLMs, all of these new terms that have now become part of our tech industry parlance. And I can remember 18 months back, we weren't even talking about OpenAI, and half the people you spoke with didn't know what LLMs were. Now the world has changed in the last 18 months. And there is a report that I read that today less than 1% of enterprise applications are agentic AI, but in 3 years, that's not too far away, 2028, 33% of enterprise applications will be AI agents. What is the problem? What should enterprise security be looking for right now?
For a shelter, I think that's the answer to begin with. But Lalit, would you like to start first, and I'll add.
Yeah, look, back to the breach point, just I wanted to highlight very quickly, there's been a couple of notable breaches around sort of LLM models where threat actors have discovered AWS access keys or Azure API keys, and then compromised those LLM models to do harmful content and dark role playing, right? So the threat actors are already 10 steps ahead of us when it comes to compromising kind of the Gen AI and sort of the agentic AI MCP servers that are cropping up now. Look, I think the big fear is clearly, with agentic AI in particular, these are going to be very, very powerful. They're going to be able to sort of communicate, start dynamically deciding what to do, interact with other things. So, the guardrails, the controls that we need to have around agentic AI is critical, right? And, we need to make sure we don't follow the bad practices of the past of kind of the static credentials. We're already seeing, even kind of LLM models generating code and proliferating the secret sprawl problem, right? So we need to make sure what we do with agentic AI in particular, we use the best-in-class zero trust models. Otherwise, I fear, some of the breaches that we see are going to be nothing compared to what we'll see in a few years' time, as these agents start taking over human kind of activities more and more and control the world more and more. So controls and guardrails are critical.
Sure. So just to add on top of that, so obviously you can imagine that as AI agents are coming and the use of let's call it computerized power and computerized analysis, we are already witnessing a rise in the use of compute power in the world, up to the fact that there is a gap that you can all see in terms of the compute power and GPU devices and GPU components and so on. Everyone understands that AI agents means much more components in the network. Some of them would behave like humans, and some of them would not behave like humans because they would actually act behind the scene and would run millions and billions of transactions, and they will move faster, and they would basically push everyone to move faster as well. In terms of their identities, some of them, again, would act as an employee in a certain organization. Some of them would act as a, again, system behind the scene and would have their own requests to the databases. They would have their own requests within APIs, and not necessarily would interact with end users rather than interact with the enterprise IT department or DevOps department or engineering department. Now, there's a common mistake thinking of, okay, so you know what? Let me phrase it this way. Unfortunately, it looks like the identity challenge that is related to AI agents is kind of overlooked as of this moment. When you are looking for information on the net, actually, when you're asked AI tools, what are the 5 most important or most troubling or concerning issues within AI security or the way to secure AI agents? The top 5 do not include the identity management as of this moment. Everyone are very much troubled with, let's safeguard the models. Let's make sure that the AI agents are not hallucinating. They're not breaking any privacy rules, not any moral rules, which some of those are philosophical. Some of them are very practical, but they're kind of the general public knowledge. What you almost do not see yet, you're starting to see, it's very at the beginning, is the education of the market with regards to the meaning of what does it mean to have more and more AI agents in terms of identity and access management. That's a very important topic that we as industry should ask ourselves. One of the common mistakes that I started to talk about earlier is that the thought that AI agents would behave like humans. Therefore, let's just provide them with the identity, the credentials of the humans that are actually using them, which is, I would at least argue, and I know that by having conversations with AI and IAM experts in the industry, it's a known mistake. It's a terrible mistake to give them the same credentials and the same identity of humans that are using them. And there are various reasons why, but I'll choose one, which is the accountability. Think about AI agents that will start now to use our own credentials and our own identities and to start and actually running all kind of operations within the organizational data. That means that we would be able to just say, oh, it's not me. I didn't touch a certain data item. I did not really read it. It was the AI agent, like the dog ate my homework and the AI agent saw my data. So it starts funny, but actually in terms of compliance and audit, it will be a disaster. So we need as an industry to find the ways, right, to implement or to, let's call it, to change the way that we think about providing identities for workloads and for machine, non-human. The way that obviously Achilles would advocate, and then as I've seen also in the industry, to switch the mind from just rotating password to dynamically creating an identity specifically for a certain usage for MCP servers as for example, that would be the way. It's a major opportunity for us also to open up the old code that we've had using Gen AI. Yeah, there has been some. There needs to be some adaptation in the way that we look at architecturing IAM for AI.
So Oded, on your kind of journey, sorry, Suresh, of thinking initially it could be human identities and now something else. So do you see agentic AI identities being just another form of NHI, or do you think this is a new breed of identities, in the market that we need to consider? What's your thoughts, positioning on that?
That's a great question, because at the end of the day, behind everything, those are machines, right? At the end of the day, those are basically algorithms, as sophisticated as they are, that are using APIs, right, SDKs in order to run. But some of them would actually use the same interactive mode that humans do, right? So this is going to be like a hybrid, heterogeneous actions. When it scales, it will act as machines as is. So if a certain IAM architect is now solving for machine identities, first, for you to know, you're on your path to also solve for the AI agents challenge. So that number one, you're on your path. This is great. But you are right, Lalit, that some of those would require some adaptation. Just a small example with the OAuth protocol. Not all of the protocol is now being implemented. and it will need, as an industry, we'll need to mature that and to make sure that all of the different tools operate and support it in the way that would allow some sort of delegation. But at the, let's call it, when you take 2 steps back, very high level, it's another type of machine with a flavor. So it's a different type of non-human identity, but at the end, it's non-human.
I agree.
Right, and if you think of it, it answers the scale, right? It is, with the scale is much higher, as we talked at the beginning of a conversation. In terms of the language, right? It speaks the machine language as well as the human, and it requires certain adaptation in order to speak with that. So it answers the same new challenges that machine provided.
Great. Guys, we are a few minutes over time, so I want to ask one last question to each of you. What advice would you give to security practitioners, CISOs, as it relates to non-human identity management? Lalit, you go first, and we'll close with Oded.
Yeah, look, I do get asked this quite a lot. I think this is a massive problem, as we've alluded to. You can't tackle the elephant in the room. You need to take a risk-based approach. But I think you need to take a top-down view, right? That having the right controls, the guardrails, the processes around managing NHIs, right? It's unacceptable in this modern world to have static credentials, hard-coded passwords, right? So people need to, you need to stop the bleeding, right? So that's one thing. I think teams, this is not a single organizational problem. It's not one department like IAM. This crosses, IAM teams, DevSecOps, security, and they need to work sort of hand in hand to make sure you come up with a cohesive kind of architecture. But I think the biggest thing, if you're starting looking at this, is first you need to understand the size of the problem. What controls do you have? Where are you in your maturity? Do you have anything? Or are you fairly advanced? And then also take a hybrid approach, right? All your new stuff, your crown jewel stuff, use kind of zero trust principles whilst you kind of try and manage and control your tech debt with your static secrets and hard-coded passwords, and make sure you've got some controls around that. That would be my advice.
Oded?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think my advice and my tip for any practitioner within security, IAM, as well as engineering security, you should start yesterday and not to wait. It's not all or nothing. So starting small is also a great thing. You can start small. You can start with the greenfields. You can start with the places that you can actually change and impact quite easily. You can start with the places within teams or engineering teams that are willing to make those changes. Number 2 common mistake is to think that secrets and machine identities are mostly hard-coded. Actually, in order to change that, you don't have to open up the code. In many places, you can just plug in, like DevOps, CI/CD areas, the Kubernetes containers. Those are the easier places to start and inject credentials, inject secrets dynamically created, and to make a beautiful change that can impact the entire organization and to definitely contribute to lower the risk of breaches. So that's on the other type. So start as fast as you can. You can start small, and don't think that everything is about hard coded and that you need to open up the code. There are many places that you don't need to open up code. Yeah, that's generally my tip of advice. Maybe one last sentence. There is some tendency that I'm obviously have a lot of conversations with CISOs and IAM professionals. There's some tendency, not like within the IAM for humans, in which we started with managing credentials, and later we got to the IGA. There is some tendency within the industry to start first with observability, which I can definitely understand. That said, always remember, observability might help you to find some of the things that you might not know, but it will not solve the problem. So observability is just to understand what's going on. It's not solving what you need. You actually need to manage those credentials, rotate them, turn them into dynamic, and to use advanced authentication methods in order to really reduce up down to the minimum the risk of breaches in related to machine identities.
Great insights. Thank you both. Thank you for joining the call. And for the participants, I noticed that we went 10 minutes over, but all of you stayed back to hear them. I very much appreciate that. Thank you again. This could go on. There is enough questions in the pipeline that I hope we can meet for another webinar and continue this conversation as well. Have a good day. Thanks.
Many
Thanks,
times. Thank you.
everyone. Cheers.